Dr. Sabrina Siegel here with a special series brought to you by the NEI Podcast. Welcome to the PsychopharmaStahlogy Show. In this special series, Dr. Andrew Cutler interviews Dr. Stephen Stahl on the most controversial, novel, and exciting topics in psychopharmacology today. Every 3 months, we will address a different theme in psychopharmacology. Each theme is split into 3 parts with 1 part released each month. The next theme is on dark psychiatry and on coercive persuasion. This theme focuses on Dr. Joel Dimsdale's new book, Dark Persuasion, on brainwashing and social media, and on the dark side of neuroplasticity. Let's listen in to Part 2, Dark Persuasion and Social Media with Dr. Donatella Marazziti.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the PsychopharmaStahlogy Podcast. And I'm really excited to be here today for what is essentially part 2 of a podcast that we did with Dr. Joel Dimsdale on dark persuasion. And today will be dark persuasion and social media with Dr. Donatella Marazziti. And with us, as always, of course, is Dr. Stephen Stahl. Dr. Marazziti, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be here and to be part of this project.
Yes.
Thank you.
You are one of the most prominent and famous Italian psychiatrists, and I understand that you have known Dr. Stahl and collaborated with him for many years.
Yes, like we could say some decades.
Is that true, Steve?
It's true, but it's hard to believe. But yes, it's been some decades.
Okay, we don't have to get into how many. That's all right.
Not detail. Please don't ask for details.
Okay. All right. We're going to be talking about something that's extremely timely right now, and that's social media. And we touched on this topic briefly with Dr. Dimsdale about we were talking with him mostly about brainwashing, but we want to talk a little bit about social media and brainwashing. And the question is social media brainwashing people, Dr. Marazziti?
It depends on the use people make of social media, because, they represent a real revolution in human history. And perhaps the enthusiasm, excitement about them has hidden the risk that they represent for everybody's life. They have provoked the real changes in human life. Everybody is traced. Nobody is aware that when you go to the supermarket or you use the credit card or you make a phone call, everybody knows, like say big brothers know where you are and so on. You buy a ticket and so they know where you're going. You just make a simple connection just to select a flight or a train and they know what are they. Perhaps they think to know your tastes and so on. You choose a restaurant and so they say they start to send you a lot of invitation for specific restaurants or for some travels and so on and so on. The other point is that there is a total neglect that, media has changed the overall privacy. And there is no privacy at all. This is my feeling. Maybe there is a total change of privacy. And according to the studies that we have been carrying out in students, even university students, that is to say, cultured people, or maybe they are or not, we don't know, but let's say at least people could try to improve their education and increase culture. They are not aware of the risk of the limit of privacy and how individual life has to cope with this media and how it's changed. So that's another big problem. So my general and final opinion is that social media has totally changed the life of everybody's life. And with, let's say, and they are so spread everywhere, and this is good from one sense. Just consider that we could continue to teach in spite of the COVID pandemic, but on the other side, there is, I could say, and I am afraid to tell you, with a partial or in some cases even total neglect of how they influence our existence.
Yeah.
And this risk is so broad in the young generation. There is no privacy at all. And as I told before, you make a simple connection to buy something.
Well, how does the lack of privacy brainwash you, Donatella?
How do I connect privacy?
How does privacy cause brainwashing?
That's the point. Privacy is a crucial problem, according to me, that is related to brainwashing, because there is no privacy. That's the point. They, invade your brain with open or, let's say, hidden messages. Mm-hmm. That's the point.
It seems the erosion of privacy started with cell phones, mobile phones, smartphones, and then, of course, social media. The evolution of social media and privacy is an illusion, of course. It's But it seems that social media is especially poised or especially good at targeting people, as you mentioned, targeting your interests, targeting your preferences. Tell me, what are some of these factors of social media that make it so able to influence you?
Why it is so easy to use social media. You can relax in your home, and you buy everything, you talk with friends and so on. And also the feedback, the response is more or less immediate. There is just a short time lag. And let's say I'm really surprised that today I don't feel any echo. I don't hear echoes. So the connection was perfect, and I think there are 6 or 7 or 8 different hours. And so, continuous improvement of the connection and rapidity to get easiness and rapidity of get a response, and this also influence and increase the use of social media. And then there is an easiness and rapidity to get a hidden message and to influence your choices, your life, and this is dark persuasion.
Yes, of course. It seems that there was kind of an optimistic, idealistic view that social media initially would connect us better and allow us to communicate better. But I think it's been a little bit of a Trojan horse, hasn't it? It's brought with it all of these other problems.
Yes, but I think that we have to tell the truth and to underline the risks, benefit and risk of the system and of the social media. I think is the right time. Even before there was an exponential increase due to COVID pandemic. Let's say, more or less, I use this parallel. We were so optimistic about the possibility to contain every disorder, every epidemic, and then we had COVID remind us that we have no sharp drugs, we have no drugs, good drug for viruses, and so on. And so, let's say, everybody, jumped to use the latest social media and so on. We can have all our world in our hands, but, there is this horrible risk that we are not free any longer, or we are not totally free in our choices.
Social media especially has this almost pernicious ability to evolve with you and to start presenting things to you based on algorithms, right?
Yes.
So this is dangerous, this kind of marketing and targeting, isn't it?
Yes, it really influences your choices. Let's say I refuse to read the newspaper in my cell phone. Every day I buy a paper newspaper because I don't like what algorithm propose to me. They focus on funny or stupid or violent news, and and there is no possibility to deepen the topic. They just show you The things, there is no comment, no opinion, nothing, and you cannot compare. You just read, you just see, you just buy, but no possibility to judge, to comment on in the right way. So that's another point.
How about a form of neuroplasticity that is caused by, if you will, involuntary learning? The conditioning. And so what we've been interested in this whole theme is whether you're using psychotherapy or drugs to change people for the good. These same processes can be potentially used to either brainwash or coerce confessions, as Joel Dimsdale's book said in Dark Persuasion. So, Donatella, do you think that, going through the algorithm that Andy said creates a form of neuroplasticity, which is basically a form of learning and a type of control, because now your brain has a circuit that's connected in the way in which you programmed it?
I think that there will be an impairment in the sense that if you only see the sharp new without any comment, and everybody get the same new, there is also uniformity. There is no heterogeneity of people. Everybody the same thing, the same food, the same new, the same choice. I am really threatened by this kind of homogeneity in thinking. What do you say? Common thought really frightens me.
Yeah, we call it groupthink, it's a form of groupthink.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think you're absolutely right. It's almost this reinforcement, this remodeling and this new circuitry that gets reinforced. It's a little bit scary, actually, because we don't know how these algorithms work. We don't know who's behind them. We don't know what their message is. And it seems like the things that get presented to you are often provocative, as you mentioned, whether it's violent or some strong opinion. That's what gets the clicks. And
there are also some hypothetical, findings, more or less hypothesis that social media can interfere with your brain processes through decreasing oxytocin level in some way. And that's also another, because if you have an immediate satisfaction of your needs, this provoke a change in the reward system. And this, the provocative title of the paper said, the social media are killing your oxytocin. And this, it is hypothesized that this will change at the end, human interactions. But on the same way, it's like it's an addiction, because you have everything shortly, immediately. So immediate reward and non-long-lasting reward. And they say, the authors claim that they can...
Donatella, you are an expert on serotonin and love. Exactly. You're an expert on stalking.
Exactly.
In due diligence for preparation for this podcast, I just happened to see last night a Netflix show called The Tinder Swindler. I don't know if you've seen that or not, but I'm sure you are an expert at this type of person who basically is a man who went online and, professed his love and actually saw women, but he was basically operating a big Ponzi scheme where he bilked women out of money, and they involuntarily almost, like the Pied Piper leading him off the cliff, gave him a life savings over and over again. So to what extent, why do we do that? These were intelligent women. So many of them had, advanced degrees. Why do people do this, Donatella?
I don't know exactly. What do you think? It's it's a very bad question that you made to me. I have to reflect on that.
I wonder if social media might actually cause a type of, my hypothesis as a neurobiologist is that without really realizing it, there's a way to create new circuits in people by programming, essentially, which then gives you control once it's established.
Yeah.
And maybe people aren't thinking that's what they're doing, but that is, I think, exactly what they're doing. And in fact, it's what we do as a living as psychiatrists and psychotherapists. We're trying to do that for the good. We're trying to reprogram people. And I think that, basically I've often called psychotherapy an epigenetic drug. Maybe social media is an epigenetic drug, which causes expression of genes that causes new circuits to be formed. And then I'm in control.
That's right. Well, it also plays into the need.
I don't want the circuit that the algorithm wants. I want my circuit based on my experience. That's the point of dark persuasion.
But it also plays into the need for belonging, don't you think, and intimacy. And this may play into oxytocin and serotonin as well, and dopamine, which are chemicals obviously released when you're in a relationship like this. And especially when people have been isolated, there's a real need for connection and belonging. And then that plays into tribalism. People start getting into this tribalistic mentality almost, belonging and this us versus them kind of thinking.
Well, one of the things that Joel Dimsdale was talking about is forms of persuasion, if that could be therapeutic and good, whether it's facilitated by drugs like psilocybin or social media, can also be bad, because there's good persuasion and bad persuasion. And people trying to make money or getting you to vote for a certain party, or they don't think they're being bad, but it could be that you've lost your ability, if you're not careful, to do this rationally and to think it through. But maybe certain signals cause you to react in a way in which social media controls you.
Especially if there's people with ulterior motives here, right?
Yeah, but let's say, I think Stahl that also dopamine is important in this case. Obviously, serotonin is crucial and all related hormones like oxytocin, but dopamine is very important.
Sure. Yeah, this is the motivation reward system. It's compulsivity. So it plays into those circuits.
Yes. The phase serotonin, more compulsivity and obsessionality. You have to be there. You have to stay connected. You have to get like. When you get like, you got some feedback, and there is hidden messages and so on.
Yeah, it reminds me of the quote from Representative Jamie Raskin, who was quoted as saying that, I can't remember if it was Voltaire or someone said, if you can get people to believe absurdities, you can get them to commit atrocities. Which I think is fascinating, how this can get people, change their thinking almost, or get them down a rabbit hole. And then you see things happen that maybe people wouldn't normally do, such as bullying or other things.
Yes. But, I also am intrigued by another question I would like to make to Stahl, if I can, to Steve.
Please.
What is the intent? I don't want to be paranoid, but why these things happen? Why we have this invasion of messages, hidden messaging, algorithms? Why we cannot stop algorithms? What do you think, Steve?
I think we don't actually understand this process basically scientifically. Yeah. We understand it phenomenologically. So if you have a goal as a marketer or as a dictator or as a teacher or as a psychotherapist, you do certain things and it can cause an outcome. But all I'm trying to say is that I believe that this is mediated by an underlying change in neurocircuitry, and that we have to be careful when you're messing with the brain so that you can do good and not harm. And although we'll probably have a hard time changing people who want to do harm, those are people listening here, we have to be careful we don't do inadvertent harm. And I think one of the calls to action that this brings up for me when I read Joel Dimsdale's book is that we are in the business probably of changing circuitry every day. And we shouldn't do it in a cavalier way, particularly now that we're maybe inducing circuit changes much more quickly with ketamine or with psilocybin, which happens within minutes. And then you're trying to use that new circuitry for good by changing traumatic memories or whatever. But if you can change a traumatic memory, I guess the point is you can change your own good judgments memory and make you buy something you don't need or vote in a certain way that you don't want.
I just reviewed a literature on brainwashing, and I was really, scared because in the past it was just a phenomenon that was restricted to specific settings, like say military settings, environments, or some political system. But now, everybody, all us, are involved in this phenomenon.
Yeah.
So we cannot escape. That's the point.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
The
horse is out of the barn. Isn't there also a problem, Steve, that this hasn't been well regulated? The regulations are way behind the evolution of the technology here.
Right. And so the reason we're bringing this up is that if they actually legalize psilocybin and some of these Schedule I drugs for use either during psychotherapy or just being prescribed out of a pharmacy, we're putting a caution out there because people can actually do whatever they want to after taking a dose, including maybe making you vote Republican or Democrat. So after psilocybin, I'm being ridiculous, of course, but we have to be careful. I think more to the point is that if you don't know what the heck you're doing and you're not being regulated and there's not even any guidelines, how do you know that you're not doing harm with this new brain that's just changes plasticity for the next 20 minutes? A bunch of people who are poorly educated could guide you down the path of doing some harm rather than good. So you're right. We don't have enough regulations. We don't have enough research. And I think that it's important to be just open to the possibility that just as social media can brainwash you into probably buying products that you don't want or dating a guy that is really a fraud and taking money from you and all sorts of stuff. Elderly people are very vulnerable to this. My own parents have been targeted and they did foolish things, because someone told them what they wanted to hear. So, just to be a cautionary tale, to be realize that all's not good with social media just because you're connected. And, that's just my point is be careful. And I think you're right. We need more regulation. I don't know what it is yet, but I think we need more research so we can develop regulations rationally.
But, we live in a strange world, and every attempt to regulate something is experienced like a limitation of freedom.
Yes.
But let's say that's the other important point. So, people can tell you bad things in the internet and the algorithm, amplify and so on. So that's the other point, how to combine individual freedom with respect of the other. And this is also something that is totally unclear at this point.
One of the things I'm wondering, Donatella, is what have you done in your own research with social media? I mean, how do you come to this? What's the basis of your interest and expertise?
Actually, we are the pioneer, let's say, and sometimes we have to fight to be pioneer as you are, And, we became interested in social media at let's say, around 10 years ago, because, this was this extreme increased use of cell phone, internet by the students. And therefore, we got, for the first time, a very good grant from the Italian government in order to study this phenomenon and also, the feature characteristic of the use of cell phone. And the results that we published were really exciting, but also frightening, because then we discovered that almost 100% of the university students were used cell phone, and they used not only for study purposes, but just beyond the normal use. Most of the students use internet, let's say between 8 and 8 hours a day, and with some sex-related differences in the sense that, let's say, a real problematic internet use was more prevalent in men, in male students than in female. And also there was a difference in terms of some domains. It's not surprising that women were using more internet for communicating, while men to enjoy. And so they they were more prone to become addicted to pornography or problematic gaming and so on. But both sexes, we saw a sharp and significantly relationship with obesity. That is to say, the longer the time, the online time, the more obese was the subject. On the same time, there was also a relationship between vulnerability toward psychopathological symptom disorder and loss of sleep due to time spent online. So, it was a very appealing, they were appealing findings. And let's say, Steph, you didn't know that this time I encountered a lot of difficulties in publishing this paper that actually was published only 2 years ago. And you know that when I have findings, I write immediately and try to publish. And, I published this paper, not in a journal in the PubMed, that is Psychiatria Danubina, that is not so good, but at least he has some impact factor. So nobody wanted to publish this paper.
Why is that, Donatella? Why did nobody want to publish?
I don't know, because probably the results, they went just, they were specific for the problem. And so journal, didn't like to publish. But we published the second. It actually was done after this and just was published before. We just wanted to investigate the same phenomena in drug addicted subjects that were attending public rehab center, and more or less we got the same result. And we also noted that drug addicted people using internet were especially those abusing cocaine or marijuana, while not surprising, those using opioid compounds didn't use that much. Perhaps
I'm wondering if there's a bias against this. It's not thought of as hard science, or maybe people are afraid of it. I don't know.
That's a possibility. They don't, some journals don't like to publish things that they go so against normal ways of thinking, that social media are good, that internet is good. But, internet is good, but the use of internet can be bad. But that's the point, and we have to tell. And that's the point that Steve underlined very well, that everything changes our brain. And really, social media are provoking a real brain change. And we must be aware of this.
Yeah, every experience you have obviously changes your brain. I remember learning about psychotherapy and being taught psychotherapy is a biologic treatment. It's actually changing these connections and circuits in your brain. And I think we haven't thought that way, that experiences rewire the brain in that way.
So there's a type of experience that influences you, and it's kind of unconscious, and it also can become almost Pavlovian, in which case you have a sensory input which causes an automatic reaction, and whether that would be to buy something at Nordstrom, or it would be to, talk to people on Instagram for hours and hours in order to seek some sort of reinforcement. And then you're not even doing it thoughtfully, and you're really having a form of addiction. So that's where I think Donatella is starting to say, and she's at the forefront, I must say, of diagnoses in the OCD realm, and asking, is there a such thing as internet addiction? We've kind of gone to gambling, and so the addiction could be, pornography or gaming, but there's another type of dark persuasion that Dr. Dimsdale talks about, which is the fact that we can all use it for influence, which isn't really an addiction in the hard sense, but it might be in, kind of like a minor addiction, leading you down the garden path to, and then what happens is that people tend to seek out only that reinforcers. So that's why people on media only do an echo chamber. They listen to the half of social media that, agrees with their point of view, and they don't listen to the other half. And then they get deeper and deeper into it. You almost see it in commentators where they use the same quote talking point. So on a certain day, you'll see the same words being used over and over again by all the different networks, and then by the people who listen to them on the street. That's the danger of the internet, is thoughtless and not being somewhat aware so that you can try to resist it. Maybe you should listen to the other side once in a while, or maybe you should be aware that your behaviors could be automatic and thoughtless.
Well, this is what Donatella said earlier. I think we've lost the different points of view. We've lost the ability to have respectful discourse and thinking about the context, the deeper lying aspects of these things. So people are just kind of getting the surface. It's almost like reading a scientific paper. You just read the abstract and don't read any of the details of the article.
Yes, they say we want to replicate the results.
Yeah, or just the conclusions even, less than the abstract. So, yeah.
Keeping up with the latest in psychiatry shouldn't be a struggle. SynovianFieldMedical.com is a new website for clinicians where you can find a library of free, hand-selected resources, such as videos and infographics on important psychiatry topics. You can request an educational program for your practice or connect with Synovian medical professionals in your area. Synovian wants to help you get all of your psychiatry questions answered. Go to SynovianFieldMedical.com and explore what Synovian has to offer.
There's a concept called social modeling. Can you tell us a little more about social modeling and how that plays a role in social media?
Yeah, the problem of social modeling is that perhaps refer to what we say, lack of heterogeneity. And perhaps people feel safer if they do the same thing or dress the same dress of everybody dress, or the testimonial dresses and so on. So I don't like at all social influencers. I think that they are really a bad phenomenon. They should be totally prohibited, forbidden, let's say. I am sharp in this opinion. We have some stupid Italians or not foreign social influencer forcing people to buy products they promote. In Italy, I say, I don't want, but let's say we had two influencers that used to promote mineral water, and this mineral water the price was around $12.
Wow.
So it was a real stupidity, but let's say it was not. No, it was not sold, but let's say just to propose such stuff, should make us reflect how stupid it can be to adhere to a model proposed by this.
That's not unique to Italy. We certainly have that in America as well. We have companies paying these social influencers or giving them their products, to use.
That's the point.
Yes.
But sometimes, they... factories, industry made their own product, and the influencer put their name on those products.
Now, Steve mentioned how elderly folks can be vulnerable, but it seems to me that younger people can be especially vulnerable, especially to this kind of thing where you want to look cool and you want to look like some of your role models, famous people. You know what I mean?
According to me, younger populations are more vulnerable because elderly people, let's say, they cannot use social media as the younger populations use. So that's perhaps this prevents them from a bad use and evil use. But sometimes old people, they have motricity problem, they even cannot phone, or they cannot read the numbers. So.
Right. I don't know. I know a lot of older folks who are very good at Facebook, very good at some of these things. But it seems to me that the younger people, we've seen a lot of statistics, a lot of research come out recently about the association of mental health problems, particularly in young women, low self-esteem. We've seen suicide rates, cyberbullying. This is a major problem for this upcoming generation.
Yes, I totally agree. And also, all some site in the dark web promoting suicide, self-cutting, and, extreme behaviors. and vulnerable young generation and women, they want to do the same. That's the bad models proposed by the social media.
Absolutely.
We had in Italy just young girls that suicide themselves in order, they get access to bad sites and then there is imitation of what they see. They are induced to suicide or to self-harm, and that's that.
Advertising for many years, of course, we've heard of the dangers of presenting a certain image of what a woman is supposed to look like, of femininity, and how that's caused all these problems with women and their self-image and self-esteem and body image. It seems to me the problem is only exaggerated and logarithmically increased with social media as well.
But is there a counter defense to this, which is to use the same weapon for good, which is to have normal bodies shown on that and saying this is beauty, and or E plus bodies or whatever, and just basically fighting back by that and not allowing people to feel inadequate because they're not gaining some essentially almost impossible norm. And in pursuit of that, maybe spending money on things for advertisers, or actually just, there are evil people out there that just want to try to make misery. So if this is happening to the downside, then maybe, some of us, particularly in psychiatry, should be more using this same weapon, if you will, for good. And saying, for example, in the case of suicide, if you're saying you're worthless and you ought to be gone and you ought to get rid of yourself because the world would be better without you, and this kind of message, you can also say suicide is irrational because it's the product mostly of a mental illness, usually depression. There's treatments for depression. If you get treated for depression, if there's much more treatment of depression, there'll be much less suicide. Not that you know which one will be saved, but just like you don't treat cardiovascular disease with CPR. That's not the only way to treat it, to wait until there's actually, an end event. So when you're suicidal, that's the end event. So before that, you treat cholesterol or you treat hypertension, and in the whole population, you're going to decrease myocardial infarctions. The same thing, we could use social media to try to promote the prudent use of medications. There's so much misinformation out there, and including some that we caused by saying that medicines, that we have 2 drugs approved for pediatric depression that are said to cause you to increase your suicidality. What kind of message is that? And so, we could be better. I think that's maybe part of the uplifting news, is that, there's bad stuff going on. People are using it to sell, but also to hurt. But so the counter is not to maybe regulate it, but to push other things out there that are actually using the same brain plasticity, but in a better way. What do you think of that?
But I think you are too optimistic, because when you have these...
No, don't tell me that.
You are. These good messages. On the other side, there are the fake news that have more or less your same weight. I mean, Dr. Star, who is Dr. Star? And then everybody can say, you are crazy, this is not true, and so on. That's the other point. We can balance science, a good information, with a right information, with the bad information that has your same algorithms. That's the point. So how we can do that?
It seems to me that anybody now, one of the things about social media and the internet is it's brought this to anyone can broadcast now. It used to be that the media was kind of controlled by bigger companies and there were certain rules and, again, regulations. But now anyone can say anything and can even do something that looks legitimate, looks like a legitimate newscast, but there's no checks and balances on that.
That's the point. Yeah. So it's very difficult.
Yeah, but I think Steve's onto something, though, that, again, going back to the utopian optimistic beginnings of social media, maybe there are ways that connecting people in a more positive, uplifting way, you're not alone, you're fine the way you are, this kind of thing. There was a campaign in America called It Gets Better for youth who are gay and lesbian. So it seems to me there are some positive ways it's going, but you're right, it's really hard to battle all of the tidal wave of other information that's out there. You mentioned fake news, and I want to go into that a little bit more. Can you tell me a little more about what you mean by fake news and how that is spread on social media.
Fake news, created specifically to counteract good information or to create confusion or to elicit fears against scientific content of other news. That is my point. And as you told just now, they are produced by people who are not expert in the specific field, but due to the algorithm, they, have the same power and weight of right information. So how a young individual can distinguish between the two, how we can balance fake news with correct and right news, how to disentangle in the forest of fake news, how to educate people to distinguish. That's the other point.
Certainly is. There was a study in America that said that the majority of people now in America get their news from a social media site such as Facebook. The majority, not from networks, not from newspapers, not from legitimate places.
Yeah, that's the same, I think, in Europe and in Italy and I think all over the world. So this is the point.
I wonder how much of this is the convenience of it. You're going to social media anyway, and there's your news feed, and there's your shopping feed, and there's your social feed. And there's a convenience and immediacy, almost like, we talk about fast food, that makes it easier than searching for legitimate sources.
Yeah, then going to the library and read books and read not only the abstract of the paper, yes, but it makes you tired. You have to spend energy in reading books and so in selecting information. I have to buy the newspaper every month. It costs money. You don't pay anything if you read the information in your cell phone. That's the point. So different reason. But you should really, you had a lot. Then the other point is that beside the fake news, there is also what we call infodemic. That is to say, too many information about some specific topics or so. We coined, this term was coined for a COVID pandemic. Too much information, too many details, everybody that could comment on everything and so on. I think you had the same in US, I think.
We do. How much do you think social media has contributed to the erosion of confidence in our institutions, such as government, such as journalism and media? We hear all the time fake news in America. And so people don't trust these institutions.
Don't trust anybody. This is the problem. Yes, there is a totally loss of confidence, trust in politicians, doctors, psychiatrists, and so on. The only thing that is really helpful is just when somebody recovered, he or she trusts the doctors or the psychiatrists and so on.
That's a good point when we think about what's going on with COVID and how much misinformation. They don't trust. And then when they get sick and come to the hospital, then they want the doctors
and then they cry, and that's that's the point.
That certainly is. There's
but
also
the difference between, let's say, a fake doctor is that correct doctor is that physicians are very human. They say, I give you what I have and I use my drugs, and my drugs generally make some improvement. In some cases they don't work, but this is the best that is tailored on you, and I will give the best drug for you, and I will explain what the side effects are and what I'm expecting. That's the difference. Fake news are sharp. They give you truth. This is the truth, but correct news, give you all details. And, I'm referring to our profession and our way of behaving. So being humble, being conscious, and making the user, the consumer, aware of the limits of what you are providing him or her.
Or maybe one of the ways to counter that is just to be aware of some of the things we're talking about, and that although convenient and a shortcut to get whatever, your news or your shopping, with a few sites, and you keep doing it because in 2 seconds you can be refreshed and know what's going on, is to realize there's another perspective, and that if you're not careful, you're limiting yourself, and that everybody except me is wrong all the time. No, there's an old story. I thought I made a mistake once, but I was wrong. I didn't. Yeah. So, we all make mistakes, and so the reality is there's no certainty. There's only kind of a point of view, and the point of view could be erroneous. It could be purposely erroneous, but it could also just be, mistaken like people do. And the same things happen with the evolving science and COVID. But the problem has been when it's been communicated as certainty, and then, that causes a problem. So all of us should realize that the information we got is probably often flawed or not quite what it looks like. And just to be aware of that and to seek out, although it takes some energy, at least occasionally, the other point of view.
Yeah, I think part of the problem you mentioned earlier, Steve, what's happened is this evolution of the media into these two extremes that are so far apart. It's very hard to find reconciliation or different points of view that are not alienating. And again, I get back to this tribality, this tribal notion. It's such a strong human drive to belong to something, to be part of a group.
And you don't have to think. You just have to go on with whatever the tribe says.
Yeah, pretty much. It's tough because there's obviously this theory that we evolved to some degree because we're basically puny creatures. If you think about it, compared to dinosaurs and other animals, we evolved to have to be social creatures to affiliate together to survive and protect ourselves. I think that drive is very strong, whether that's oxytocin or serotonin or dopamine. Yeah.
And I'm very frightened by the possibility that there is a common and uniformous way of thinking, because, human beings survived and then evolved because they were different.
That's right.
And different is important, different opinion, different way of living and so on.
Different and yet ability to cooperate, with maybe people who didn't have the same point of view.
And yes, human skill of cooperation is the most important for survival. And there is another evolutionary theory that amongst the human beings, those who survived were not the strongest or the most aggressive, but those who cooperated and helped the other in difficult moments. And probably this was true.
Right. If you think about healthy defense mechanisms, humor is one, altruism, things that draw other people to you. Yeah. And the unhealthy ones, projection, splitting, blaming, that they're the ones that alienate you from other people.
Yes.
So why is it that social media is not alienating people? Why is it? I don't know. Why is it that we're still so addicted to this thing?
As I told you, because they provide you an immediate reward without just no spending of energy. It's easy. It doesn't cost anything in terms of energy spent or money. And so that's the point. Easiness.
How do we understand cyberbullying and why that's become such an issue? What is it about social media that lends itself to cyberbullying?
Because, they move aggression that is inside humans. That's the point. And, cyberbullying is not considered, since you are in your house, you just prevaricate somebody who is far. So it's not the same that aggressive indirectly, face to face, just screen to screen. That's the point. It is not considered to be illegal that you can do so. It's a normal behavior that you can do.
But you mentioned too, there's an anonymity. It's anonymous. And sometimes I guess people with social media will say things they wouldn't say in person, face to face with someone.
Yes.
It sort of allows you to, I don't know.
You can do everything. That's the point. You are allowed to do everything, even to be aggressive. It's just you hit him, you scream, you call out by your distance, so it doesn't matter.
There's a term called trolls and trolling. There's cyber trolls, right? I always find that fascinating. But it seems that social media lends itself especially to that. Maybe because of this anonymous nature, that it allows you to indulge these darker sides of our personalities, perhaps, or as you said.
I think anonymity is a matter because, you can do everything. You are just another personality. You pretend to be what you are not. You conceal your defect. Yeah.
Well, so I wonder, is the CIA using the internet to do its dark persuasion today instead of the psilocybin of the 50s? I don't know. We'll never know, I suppose.
It seems to me there is a lot of distrust of government and of the deep state and big conglomerates that are trying to gain control of us. I think this is a big fear people have, is a fear of losing control.
Yeah.
And yet, ironically, by overusing social media, you are losing control, aren't you? If you become addicted to it.
But you just don't realize it. That's why you allow it to happen. So part of our news on this podcast is just be aware that there are these ways of being controlled, and there are ways to be less controlled by just basically looking at other points of view and being a little bit cynical about what you hear.
Yeah. It just occurred to me, Steve, we have treatments for addictions, or we have ways of treating addiction. So, Dr. Donatella, how might we be able to use some of those methods for helping with this social media and internet addiction?
Yes, I think, the neurobiological hypotheses are focused on the similarities between pharmacological and non-pharmacological addictions, and that includes problematic internet use. So let's say in terms of treatment, I think that what the therapeutic approaches, strategies that we use from addiction should be largely employed in the excessive use of social media. The problem is that we need specific criteria, and there is not general agreement on what criteria should be used.
Yeah.
So some people have likened it to the treatment of an eating disorder. So, for example, you can take an addict and eventually, I suppose, get to abstinence. That's how you actually treat.
Yes, that's the point.
But you can't be abstinence of all food, and you can't be abstinence of probably all media.
Not anymore.
So the very dangerous thing is to actually go back and being able to take some media and not binge on it, essentially.
I totally agree. We have withdrawal symptoms when they cannot use the media. But the other model that we can use is that, as you already mentioned, obsessive-compulsive disorder. So we have these two models, addiction and obsessive-compulsive disorder, that can be also related. But we can use both in terms of therapeutic strategies. I think we also should propose alternatives to people using this media. And, as Steve already mentioned, to, use the weapon in order to be good, and so to propose that life is not just sitting in one room and just looking at media and so on, but there is the life, and to buy.
Well, that's what I've been doing for 2 years. Look at this darn Zoom screen.
No, go out for shopping, not online shopping. Right? In spite of COVID, go out and have shopping.
This reminds me, I have 2 teenage sons, and a couple of years ago, I'll never forget, I walked into my son's bedroom, and he's on the computer, he's on the internet. And I said, why don't you go out and play with your friends? And he goes, Dad, I am playing with my friends. You see, it just blew my mind, because, of course, when I was a kid, you'd be out playing sports outside, and running around.
They have friends on the other side of the ocean.
Over the world. It's true.
I have a good friend in Australia, and that's these are teenagers.
Well, the concept of friends is interesting, because can they really be friends? They've never met. I mean, you present yourself on the internet, and
it was like romantic relationship of the 18th centuries. They used to write letter and passionate.
Yeah, it's a false intimacy. It's an illusion of intimacy, isn't it? But again,
Yes.
it's a human drive. It's a human desire we all have. So what is the future of social media? Where is it going? What can we do about it?
I think the future is what Stahl said. We cannot stop using social media, so we have to make them less wild, and more human. And so to use them to promote human skills. That is, yes, they can be good for people who have problems to establish friendship, but, face-to-face meetings, we should underline what is better for human beings. I must add before answering this that I have a real fear that probably we are going toward extinction of the human species because, I am thinking, people have sex online, but how they can procreate? So, that's the problem,
Yes.
everything is okay, but how to procreate? So, it's really problem because they have. Oh, I have my girlfriend. You meet online, and then so how can be rewarding to kiss personally another individual instead to kissing on? That's another point that we should think. So we are going toward extinction of the human species. Maybe yes. So how we have to counteract this, and so use social media to underline what good things that should be done, the risk within them, and so give positive messages in order to decrease the use and to promote encounters, and promote reading books, newspapers, and so on.
Yeah, so it's about getting social media to augment our experience rather than to become our experience.
Yes.
Right?
Outside experience.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's about balance, right?
Yeah.
Balance. Franklin said nothing to excess, including moderation.
Very good. Very good.
But even Einstein said that in order to cope with new problem, we have to create a new way of thinking. So let's say every problem perhaps is just the starting of a new and focused initiative, a new way of thinking. And Steve and I are optimistic, let's say, and we think that we also will survive and will make social media more human. That's my hope, and probably is also my certainty.
This is a good point you're making, that it's too close to our eyes. It's too early, probably, in the evolution of social media to figure out where it's going to go and what's going to happen. It's too hard to tell.
I agree with Steve. They should be regulated. I just remember what happened with Facebook, the influence of U.S. election that they have. So, and since Facebook owners are so rich, they don't, they can pay all the money that they want, although they are guilty. And so we have, they should pay more and more money when they make mistakes and, and fraud and so on. That could be a good possibility. I have nothing against Zuckerberg, but the bad use of Facebook, I remember all this stuff and so.
Somehow, Facebook somehow is not regulated. I mean, if you think of other media outlets that are publishers, there's regulations on publishing things, and Facebook and other social media, in a sense, is publishing all of this information. It's presenting it to people, and yet they're able to not be regulated in such a way. So we obviously need an evolution of our regulation. I agree, and the penalty structure, the consequences of this kind of behavior. And we're at the early days of that, obviously. So maybe it will evolve in a better way. Just like other new technologies and other new forms of media have taken time for people to figure out how to regulate them.
Yes, I always made a parallel with morphine and opioid. These are excellent painkiller. So I use I think they get one morphine injection when I broke my leg, and it was one of the most beautiful days of my life without pain, relaxed and joyful. And that's, but if abused, so the point, we have to use social media, we cannot escape from using them, but we have to use them the right way. And so that's the point.
Yeah, it's about moderation, as Steve said. Well, I don't know that we've painted a really rosy, optimistic picture. I think we're trying to be optimistic. But I think we've outlined some of the pros and cons of social media. We've talked about how it can be used. We didn't really get into politics, and we don't have time really to get into that. But obviously, social media has influenced politics very strongly, as you mentioned. Certainly, there was interference in our election in 2016, at least, and it's just something else that's going to be with us for now. People are always going to try to get us to persuade us to their point of view.
But every politician who is of a certain level has a social media specialist or more than one in order,
yes,
to influence voters, electors.
They're persuaders and influencers, absolutely. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Our hour has gone by very quickly. And I really want to thank you, Donatella, for joining us all the way from Italy. This has really been fascinating. And I just want to put in a plug for you. If people would like to learn more, please go to Dr. Marazziti's website at Donatella Marazziti, MARAZITI.com, which is where I did some of my research to learn about you. You've been very prolific and really done some incredibly important things.
He's my teacher. He's my model.
Well,
social model.
He's that way for many of us. And I want to put in, speaking of which, I do want to put in a plug. If you're listening to this, it's 2022. And if you're listening to this in time for the annual APA meeting this year, May 21st on Saturday at 4 p.m., Steve, you're going to be part of a really fascinating symposium that was organized by Dr. Joel Dimsdale, and it's called Brainwashing, a Haunting Past and Troubling Future for Psychiatry. And Dr. Marazziti and Dr. Stahl will be there, as well as Dr. Dimsdale, and the moderator will be Dr. Paul Summergrad. And so I think this will be fascinating to talk about brainwashing, various means of coercion, including social media, drugs, and the biology of what happens to the brain, as Steve talked about. So thank you both so much. And please tune in for our other podcasts in this series, the PsychopharmaStahlogy series, and check out the NEI website, NEIglobal.com, for more information. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Ciao, Steve. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the NEI Podcast. Please let us know what you'd like to hear more about by leaving a review. Don't miss another episode. Subscribe today.